We're learning to transcend victim, oppressor, victim tyrant, whatever you want to call it, victim perpetrator consciousness. Literally everything you can name in this world comes down to that. It comes down to how do we handle these situations? Our tagline is change the world by changing yourself. Because the principle, the metaphysical principle that we operate on is that the outer world is a mirror of our own unconscious self.
Mm.
So, in other words, it's bridging that connection. It's not something random and separate that's happening outside of us. We're connected. It's a part of us in some way, whether it's a war or harm to an animal or whatever is going on. If it's in our orbit, it's there for a purpose.
Right, a big welcome back, everyone, to the next in my series of Deprogrammed, What They Never Told Us. So one of the greatest acts of rebellion in today's world is opening up our heart. In this next episode, I'm joined by spiritual teacher and humanitarian Brad Laughlin to explore why the ancient wisdom of the heart has been hidden and why reconnecting it might be the most powerful step we can take towards personal and collective liberation. We're going to be diving deep into the old paradigm that keeps us in fear, judgment, and blame, and how the shift to a paradigm of the heart opens us up to healing, truth, and even one of our favourite things of all time, interspecies communication. But before we dive deep, Brad is a new guest to my show, so let me tell you a little bit about him. Brad Laughlin's core work is about helping people to awaken spiritually and to find love, joy, and inspiration during these times of great change. Using ancient truth teachings, yogic practices, and spiritual psychology, he offers simple yet powerful practices for transformation. One aspect of Brad's work includes interspecies communication, which is actually how we connected. This opens us up to the understanding that we're not separate individuals, but our thoughts, feelings are shared and we are all interconnected at another level of consciousness. Brad and his life partner, Leslie Temple Thurston, are co-founders of the non-profit corelight.org, and their humanitarian arm, seedsoflight.org, serves marginalised communities in South Africa. So if you're ready to really step out of fear, reclaim your inner compass, and live from the wisdom that they don't want you to remember, this is definitely the episode for you. Brad, it's such a delight to meet you on camera this time so that everyone else can meet you with me. And we were introduced by really good friends of both of ours, Ole and Kim Damagard. How are you doing? It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, Catherine. It's a total delight to meet you, and I'm so grateful to Ole and Kim for introducing. When we talked before, we realized we're very kindred spirits.
Absolutely. And I think what your life work, I mean, we're only just going to be able to introduce people to this, but some really important facts for people that are really struggling with this is how I'm seeing the world, but I want to recreate something different. And I find at the moment, Brad, from all different sorts, whether you're listening, which I don't think many of my audience do listen to mainstream media, but even the alternative media can be very much about pulling us into this fear state and making us feel that we don't have control over ourselves and our lives. So, when you're talking about the new paradigm of the heart, what exactly does that mean?
Well, that's a big question. We could talk a
Yeah.
long time about that. Um, I would say it's the discovery of the power of love, the power of our hearts. You talked about the fact that we're all being invited into fear by the mainstream media and others. It's a regular occurrence daily. So what I would say about the new paradigm of the heart is that it's so much about transcending fear, facing the fear and choosing love instead. And also we're being invited into polarization, one set of facts two spins to get us to divide and be angry with each other, to fear each other, and so forth. And so, the work that I do is so much about finding a way through polarization and into unity consciousness.
It's so important because as you were saying that, I was just thinking I think anyone watching this can immediately think of so many examples of how we are being pulled into polarization. Even
Right.
people who are on this spiritual or awakening journey, whatever you want to call it, there's still so much polarization. And I was looking this morning at your website, Brad, and one of the things that you were saying that really stood out to me. So I'm going to read it out if I may, and then ask you about it. In this new paradigm of the heart, we use power in a non polarized way. We do not project it onto authority figures and indulge in power games. Those games have brought us to where we are now, controlled at the edge of a cliff. There is a way out. It's a path many are discovering. It's walking the middle way, the way of balance between extremes, the way of opening their heart. I find that so powerful that you've got on your website. And it's sort of, even when I'm reading it, and I've given a lot of contemplation to that over the last week, Brad, and it's interesting to see myself seeing that and then going into the but stage. But what about this? But what about that? So can you go a little bit deeper into this non-polarization and how your awareness of I know from speaking to you that you've got a huge awareness of the state of a lot of the issues going on in the world at the moment, but you still manage to bring yourself back and teach others to be in this heart space and not buy into that polarization. Can we dive a bit deeper into that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a passion of mine. Sounds like it is for you too.
Yeah,
And I think you hit the nail on the head. The thing that almost everybody I know these days is struggling. People struggle to see what's happening in the world, to see the very real changes that are going on and the challenges, and then to find our way through that. Um, my the way I practice this is maintaining a sense of what I call the witness. Uh, and the witness is that part of us that is connected to who we truly are, which is that we are pure awareness, we are pure consciousness, we are pure love. And all of the emotions, the thoughts, the experiences of life, they're all passing through us. Those things are not who we are. So the witness is very aware of that at all times. The witness can also be called an objective observer. And so it's a practice of continuing as often as we remember to invite in our objective observer and see the world through that lens of the witness, the objective observer, where we can witness whatever's going on and still maintain that connection to the truth of who we are, to love, to the heart. And easier said than done. It's as when you get faced with some of these challenges in the world today, especially anger, I would say. Anger and
yeah,
fear are two of the biggie, and depression. Those three things, anger, fear, and depression, are huge. You see what's going on. You see, the devastation of an ecosystem or harm to some people or animals, whatever it is, to the natural world. And it's natural to react. It's natural to go into fear or anger or depression or whatever. And so the practice that I teach is how do we do that? How do we maintain our sense of witness in the face of those situations and our own emotions? And to just we don't have time to go into all the details. I mean, I teach courses and we've written books on this subject, but as an overview, really, what it is there are some very simple ways to do this, simple ways of maintaining that witness, simple ways of what we call them clearing practices. And they are ways to clear the ego, ways um, to know what to do when you get triggered. When you get triggered and you go into fear, what do you do? or anger. And to me, it's a way of life. It becomes a way of life once we commit to doing that, and we know that that's what we want. We want to be able to maintain the heart. We want to be able to maintain our truth throughout these changes that are going on. Does that
It,
make sense?
it makes perfect sense. And it's really
Yeah.
interesting because I work a lot with traumatized animals that have been through a lot of trauma.
Mm.
And I think anyone who's lucky enough to share their life with animals knows that they feed off our energy. And what I mean by that is they're so impacted by what mood we're in, what emotions we're holding on to or displaying outwardly. And so anyone who's dived deep into breathing practices, for example, knows that we can shift our energy field and it will be mirrored by the animal very quickly. But I think sometimes, Brad, when we're working human to human, we don't necessarily apply those same principles and really understand how it does all come back to us. It's such a cliche of saying it all comes with controlling ourselves, I'm probably not using the right word, controlling, but really being aware of how we're showing up and not faking it, not thinking one thing about someone in here and saying something sickly sweet on the outside. What's your experience when people are looking at some of these things, particularly if you're a real empath and you might be having a really good time of it at the moment, but you can see the atrocities happening in some other parts of the world or to animals or, as you say, to nature. What are some of the ways that you can really help people to understand that by really getting into their own heart, they really can impact others?
That's such a great question. Thank you, Catherine. Well, the nonprofit that you mentioned that my spouse and I founded, corelight.org, our tagline is change the world by changing yourself. Because the metaphysical principle that we operate on is that the outer world is a mirror of our own unconscious self.
Mm,
So, in other words, it's bridging that connection. It's not something random and separate that's happening outside of us. We're connected. It's a part of us in some way, whether it's a war or harm to an animal or whatever is going on. If it's in our orbit, it's there for a purpose. It's there so we will look at it. And what I find is the empowering way to cope with these situations that are sometimes so challenging is to remember this, to remember that this is not separate and outside of me. This is a part of me. What part of me is this? And that's the question to ask. Why is this here? What am I to learn from this? How am I to help? What specifically, what part of this is me? And then you go from there. We have all kinds of exercises, practices to do to support that because it's a concept, but actually getting very practical with it is a different thing. And that's what we do. We like to get down and be very practical with the practices so that it becomes a very real thing that you can see how the changes that you make inside of you then affect the outer world. Just like you said with animals, you watch this happen all the time. When we shift our energy, the animal responds differently.
completely.
Yeah. Well, it's
There's
true. It's true and it's what I want to go back to what you said before is that it's a little bit easier somehow to apply it to an animal,
yes,
because we see that immediate response and we recognize what's going on. But with people, it is different, I think, because we're taught from a very early age that we're separate.
mm,
You're you, I'm me, and there's a lot of space between us, and that's it. But that's not the truth. The truth is that all of our thoughts and feelings are shared. It might look like you have a separate body from me, um, and at one level, that's true. At one level, we are separate in that way. But I like to look at things multidimensionally. There's so many layers. And at those higher levels, you see that's when you wake up and you
yep,
see that, wow, this really is a part of me. my thoughts and feelings are maybe not even mine. Maybe I'm picking up somebody else's thoughts or feelings. Often, I would say, often that's maybe most of the time that's the case. I've had some amazing experiences of I've written some stories about this in my book, but picking up other people's thought forms, thinking it's mine, almost getting ready to act on it. Like I was this one time I was I was driving through. I used to live in Los Angeles, and I was in a very expanded state. I'd been on a spiritual retreat, and I was driving through different parts of LA. And as I would drive through those different parts, I'd start to think certain thoughts. Um, like, for example, driving through West LA, where there are a lot of wealthy people, I started thinking, I really need to get a new car. And I
Mm.
started imagining what car I would get and planning the purchase and the shopping and all that. And then I thought, wait a minute. I don't need a new car. These are not my thoughts. I'm picking up the thoughts of everybody around me. And another one was driving through, I was, again, same trip. I was in this very expanded state and very few thoughts in my mind. I was very expanded. And I was driving into the greater Los Angeles area from the desert, from the Mojave Desert. And one of the first places you hit is a place called Barstow. And it's a place that has a lot of bars, and they're biker bars, and it's kind of a town where you can go to drink and whatever, party.
Mm.
And I started thinking, I want a beer,
Yeah.
and I want my chick. And I don't use that word, but that was the thought. And
Yeah.
I thought that was what was so easy for me to recognize that, wait a minute, I don't want a beer and I don't want a chick. Thinking like, how can this be happening? And then I realized, oh my God, I'm picking up all the thoughts of this area. So it was a lesson for me. It was a great lesson for me to realize that that's so much a part of our journey of awakening and to be able to move into the heart and to the witness, the truth of who we are. It's recognizing that
Yeah.
we are not individuals. If you look at that word individual, um, it says it all. Divided in duality, in divide dual. And it's in our language, and it's what we're taught as children, that you're an individual, you have autonomy, and you're separate from everything else, from people, from nature, and everything else in the world. And so I would say, the path of awakening is this realization. It's part this realization is part of it in any case. And when we literally, when we start to experience it, I think that's when we really begin to wake up.
I couldn't agree more. And I can already see that my questions are not going to be very succinct to you today, Brad, because they're sort of thought processes are coming out. So I apologize to Brad and everyone for that. But when you were saying that, it's interesting because this series is about deprogramming. And I had a fantastic interview with Jason Christoph about that last week. And I think so many of us are now understanding that like you said, the clues in the name, individual, TV programs tell a vision. And so many of us are aware of these external sources that can program us. And whether
Yeah.
it's in the music, whether it's in the subliminal, the ads, I mean, there's so many experiments people can look up about how easy it's to do. And I think most people are pretty well aware of that. But I don't think many of us, Brad, make the connection about how we are also programming ourselves and others around us as well. It's quite easy to sort of visualize it when you're looking at an external technology like television or music. Again, there's something outside of ourselves without realizing that all of this power is within ourselves. And so my question is why do you think, we can see from your bio, so much of your work is rooted in this ancient wisdom, and yet so many of us are disconnected from that, which I believe is deliberate. Why do you think that there's such an effort to hide these powers in this realization from all of us?
Again, many levels, right? You can look at it from a very material world level,
Mm.
or it would some people say 3D level. You can look at it from a very high spiritual level as well. So if we start with that perspective, looking at it from a very high spiritual level, this is our evolution. This is our soul's evolution. As a species, we came in to learn about separation. We came in to learn about what does it feel like to be autonomous and to be, the master of your own little world, where you're the king or queen of your castle. And we get to play power games in the world. That's what it's been about for so long. This past age, the several ages we've been in, have been all about that. Some people call it, learning lessons about power
Mm.
or learning lessons about the abuse of power,
Mm.
right? And so, as souls, we as individuals, as a collective, we're learning to move into the heart now, from the lower chakras into the heart, to move into this place of less polarization, and um, and so I would say, the big lesson, I can't remember if you and I talked about this before, but I'll ask you this question anyway. It's for your audience, I guess. But if you could name one lesson, one, let's say, knot in consciousness that we as a species are every single one of us unraveling right now, the number one lesson we're learning, what would you say that it is?
Goodness, one.
Yeah,
How can
just
I
one.
think
You can
of
only
one?
name one. There's many, but what's the one that kind of covers everything?
For me, the thing that comes to mind is self-responsibility.
Yeah, well, you're right on target. The way I would describe it, I think you're absolutely right. The way I would describe it is victim tyrant
Yes.
consciousness. We're tran
Yes.
we're learning to transcend victim oppressor, victim tyrant, whatever you want to call it, victim perpetrator consciousness. Literally everything you can name in this world comes down to that. It comes down to how do we handle these situations?
Mm.
And your question is a big one, and so I
Mm.
have to talk about this because from a spiritual perspective, everything as I see it falls into that category. So we're talking from a much higher level of learning that we as souls chose the experiences that we came in to have, right? As individuals, we came in to experience whatever we need to learn. Whatever, nothing is random. Nothing is something that's being done to us. It's that I know it sounds cliche, but it's that life is being done for us, not to us, right? And so that's sort of the essence of it. It is a cliche, but it's true, and it's a profound truth. Because from that higher level, we're learning to see that. We're learning to see that we came in um, to have these experiences and yet maintain this witness place, this heart, where we're learning to transcend that consciousness of victims and oppressors. So that's the high level. When you come down in at the 3D, very material world level, it doesn't look like that at all.
Yeah.
They're very, very real victims, very real tyrants, right? And there's good and evil. There's all these polarities. You're dealing with all of these different polarities, and so it looks so real.
Yeah.
How do we get through that? And I think that's the journey that we're on is that question. How do we get through that? It seems so real, and yet, quantum physics is starting to discover the truth of the ancient spiritual teachings that this material world is not real. It's not, the table that I'm knocking on right here, this wooden table, is 99.9% space.
Yeah.
But it's real, it's solid. How is that possible? So I feel like that's the big awakening that we're all going through is having these very worldly experiences of victims and tyrants and saviors. I'd add the savior in there too,
Oh my
because
goodness, that's a huge
yeah,
one.
Well, this is it. As you originally talked about how you were reading my website, and you were saying it said about projecting our own power and authority onto the outside world. And that's what we're taught to do as children. It's
Yeah,
very, very natural. It's totally natural and normal to project our power out.
yeah,
We want mommy and daddy to fix it for us. We want the school teacher to be the one to tell us what to do. We learn from a very early age. You talked about programming. Everyone on this planet, pretty much, unless you're very, very fortunate to have very conscious parents, we're taught as very young children to obey
mm,
and be good. And if you don't obey, you're not good. And you get a
mm,
bad grade for that. And you might even get corporal punishment. You might get spanked,
mm,
or whatever, a ruler across the hand. I don't think they do that much anymore. But in my day, back when I was a kid, that was very
yeah,
common. And so, we're taught, even today, kids are, it's less severe now probably than before, I suppose. I don't know, but, we're taught to be good and obey and don't step out of line because if you do, you're bad. And so this is one example of the programming everybody gets,
mm.
and it's reinforced up into our adult lives. Um, and so, yeah, so anyway, I'm going on a bit, but your question is such a profound one. There's a lot to say. So from the
Yeah,
high
please do.
spiritual,
I'm loving it.
the
Yeah,
okay, well, the very high spiritual level we talked about, it's learning those lessons, and from the very practical 3D material world level, it's getting programmed. It's getting taught that we're separate. We are individuals. We're not connected. And it's having to be put through these experiences that seem so real of victimization. And then we project out that there is a tyrant or a perpetrator doing it to us,
mm,
and the human impulse is to blame. The human impulse is to make it about what's outside, to make it about the other person, or about life, or about Earth, or about something bigger than us that's oppressing us, right?
yeah,
And and so we're dealing with situations where we feel victimized. And to me, that's that's the big that's the number one issue. We're all looking at how do we get through that? How do we go through these changes that the world is going through? Um, how do we recognize this victim perpetrator consciousness? And let's throw in savior as well, victim
mm,
perpetrator savior consciousness. How do we get through that and maintain our hearts, maintain our witness? And so just since we threw in Savior and you were interested about that, I'll just say one more thing, and that is that, we're talking about polarization, and it's obvious that victim and perpetrator are opposites, right? They're always playing opposites, but there's this other opposite of the Savior. The victim by definition, has two opposites. One is the perpetrator, but the other is the savior,
yeah,
because the victim gets abused, and then it wants somebody, something, some whatever to come and save it. And there's nothing bad or wrong about that. That's just the way we've been programmed. That's just the way it is. And that's, I think, as old as time.
mm,
So here we are. We're at this pivotal moment where we get to bust that. We get to look at that and go, no, I don't need to live that way anymore. And then the other pair of opposites is savior and perpetrator are obviously opposites. The savior is the authority who is quote unquote good, who wants to help
mm,
and save and rescue. And the perpetrator is the authority that's so-called bad and wants to abuse and take advantage of. And so, see, these are the dramas. These are the
yeah,
dramas. And I think when we awaken as individuals, when we awaken to that dynamic, so much more is possible because that's our empowerment, right? That's where we get to say, oh, if I'm living out these dramas, and if the world is giving this to me, and I realize that metaphysical truth, that everything in the world is a part of me, then I have the power to change it in myself, and then the world starts to change.
Oh, it's so true. I literally could spend hours talking about this, and I love making sort of using the practical examples so that when people are listening, they can sort
Right,
of think, oh, actually, that does apply to me. Because over the last couple of years, Brad, I've been talking a lot with various different guests about this black and white thinking that
right.
it's like it's choice A or it's choice B, and actually, there's 50 shades of grey in between and more that it can be. And I think one really clear example. I was out with some really good friends yesterday, and they've got a rescue dog, as I have got rescue animals. And for anyone listening to this verbally, I'm doing sort of inverted, question marks and speech marks when I'm saying that, because I'm very well aware that's not a constructive term to use, but just to get there quickly. And we all know examples that you can have one animal, same animal, that will respond completely differently depending on which human they're with at the time. We know anyone who rides horses know that some people have what they call a calming seat and some people have what they call an excitable seat. So you can get on the same horse and it will bolt off with one person bucking and will be, plodding along nicely with the other person. Same horse, different rider. And I think this is where sometimes working with animals can be such wonderful, wonderful teachers for us, because we can come across a person, whether it's someone in our personal lives or a politician or a evil character that we're all talking about. We can all name, put the name in for there for whoever that evil person might be for you. Normally someone who works for, Klaus Schwab is a perfect example. But equally, there will be people that love that person and see a very different side of them and have very different interactions to them. So I think what would you say for someone listening to this when they listen to this and think, well, that applies to someone else, not myself? What sort of examples of stepping into the witness state could they be asking themselves to realize that we're all doing this to some degree or another, and actually until we recognize that and start working on ourselves with that, we can't keep expecting the perpetrator or the savior to change. It's not really about that.
I can tell you what I do.
Yeah,
Again, this is a big question. There are many ways
I
to
know.
answer
Sorry.
this. No, it's great. I love that you're asking these questions, but I write whole books on that one question, or
Exactly.
teach whole
We're going
courses
to be
on that
taught.
question.
Oh, this is such an amazing book. I'll be talking about this in a minute. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. But yeah, I can tell you my practice, what I do. One of them, there are many, but um, when something presents itself to me that triggers me, it gives me some kind of reaction, the first step is to say, what's the opposite of this?
Love it.
It can also be just thoughts or emotions that come up. You don't even have to be triggered, but if you suddenly like start feeling anger or fear or depression or whatever it is, um, it's so helpful to ask that first question. What's the opposite of this? The reason it's so empowering is because everything or almost everything you can name in our world has an opposite side.
Mm.
It doesn't take much thinking to realize the truth of that. It's in nature. It's night and day, the spring and fall, summer and winter, the rains and the droughts, all of that. And it's true for human consciousness as well. And so let's just say you're in a situation where suddenly your least favorite politician appears on the screen and you get angry, right? And so you say, okay, what's the opposite of this? And what would you say is the opposite of anger?
Peace.
No right. Yeah, peace. There's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever feels true for the person in the moment. But peace is a good one. Love is another one. Anger has many different opposites. But can you feel how when you simply name peace, there's a lessening, right? There's a relaxing, there's a lessening of the tension. And Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychologist, he used to talk about this as holding the tension between two sides of a polarity. Practice. So this is part of the witnessing practice that we teach. It's you see, as you said, Klaus Schwab, you see him on the screen and suddenly hate rises up in you, or fear, or whatever it is. And you say, okay, what's the opposite of fear? And you might get what? Love,
Mm,
or sometimes fear and hope
mm.
can be opposites, or fear and desire can be opposites. And so you might see Klaus Schwab and you might fear that the world's being taken over by a tyrant. Um, but if you say, what's the opposite of that fear scenario? It's your hope scenario. What's your hope scenario? It's that the world is going to be governed and imbued with all these wonderful people filled with love in their hearts, you know? And so suddenly, when you look at those two scenarios, there's a lessening of the tension. And if we can practice holding that tension between the two sides, I mean, first step is to name it, right? First step is you've got to name the opposite. Second step is to just practice for a few moments, even just holding that tension between the two sides, not pushing or pulling either side, just holding the two. And eventually, what you find is that it's much easier to get into your center. It's much easier to become balanced when you're holding that tension.
Oh,
That's a simple example.
yeah.
It's small, but it's a start. And there's so much more you can. The other thing I like to do is there's a visualization that you can do. The witness self, that objective observer part of us, is there are many different visualizations that I use for it, but one is the seesaw, like on the children's playground. You see positive and negative going up and down on the two sides. And the witness is the fulcrum. It's that
Yeah.
center point that maintains a certain balance amidst life's ups and downs, amidst the flow of positive and negative.
Oh, I
So
love
that's
that.
another, yeah, that's another, there's all kinds of little exercises and practices that you can do to maintain that witness state. Um, I can just feel people thinking, yeah, but that's just too simple and that doesn't solve the problem. But the truth is that when you practice that, and when you can even take it further with other practices, but when you practice that and you feel the shift inside you, you are affecting everyone and everything around you. Even
Yeah.
if you, yeah, even if they're on the other side of the world, even if it's Klaus Schwab in Switzerland.
Mm.
Uh,
We'll be sending you love, Klaus. Yeah.
yeah,
I love him as an example because most people can picture it, picture him
right.
immediately. So, sorry, Klaus, we're picking on you. Yeah,
Well, I think he agreed to play that soul, agreed to come in and play a role for us, and he's doing a very good job.
absolutely. And this is
It
what,
does,
remember, they
it,
played the role beautifully. Yeah,
yeah, no, they're actors. They're actors in our very own drama. We are the director, we're part of the cast, and here we are.
exactly. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Uh,
One of the things I'm intrigued about your thoughts of, Brad, is when you're looking at education, media, healthcare, etc. Why do you think, or do you think actually, that there's been a deliberate agenda to keep us in the headspace and out of the heart space?
well, again, it's a big question, but I come back to what I was saying before about I feel like there's no accident. This is part of this evolution that we have each chosen as individual souls and that we've chosen as a collective.
Yeah,
So the systems outside of us, the media, the education, the government, the corporations, the banks, the military industrial complex, we could go on, right? But all these systems have developed to a stage where they're playing out this exact scenario we've just discussed. They can either be considered our greatest tyrants, or if we're in that victim consciousness, we could see them as our greatest saviors,
mm,
right? Somebody who's buried in victim consciousness, who doesn't really see a bigger picture, might think, We just need the right politician. If we have the right father figure, everything will be fine and we will be saved.
Yeah.
Or they might say, well, no, it's science. It's the doctors and the science. If they can just achieve this next goal, or if they can just develop this perfect whatever, everything will be fine. And that's exactly what you were talking about before. That's putting authority outside of us. That's projecting our own power outside, and it's very disempowering because that's not what's going to change the world. What's going to change the world is our own awakening, the awakening of many, many people. In fact, can I just segue for a minute? I feel like I need to just share a little story. Is that
Please
okay?
do. Yeah.
Well, I remember this reminds me, my spouse, Leslie, is clairaudient, which means she hears her spiritual guides telepathically. And it was in the year 2001. And so 9/11 had just happened, and America had a new president. And we were being told as an American public that we needed to go and invade Iraq because they were dangerous. They had nuclear weapon capabilities or something like that. And Leslie and I could both feel all that stuff that was going on at that time that I'm mentioning. It was all a manipulation. There was something not right about what we were being told. And I'm sure many people, if they're listening to your show, are in the same camp there. But anyway, I only ever saw Leslie angry a handful of times in my life. And there was this one day where that in 2001, early to that, she came marching down the stairs. She said, I just screamed at my spiritual guides. I said, this is not okay. What is it going to take to change the world? And she said they responded very quickly and succinctly. And they said, a lot of enlightened women.
Wow.
And I let that sink in and I thought, wow, what about me? What about the men? What does that mean? Does that mean it's not important for men to also wake up? And we talked about that a lot. We processed that a lot because it was a very cryptic statement in a way, but we felt the truth of it. We felt the truth of it. And what we saw was that, for many thousands of years, and this is very broad brushstroke, of course. I'm not saying everybody, but in general, the masculine has held the power up here, up high. The feminine has been down here, down low. If you're listening, I'm just holding my hands at a different level. But what her guides were saying was that it's not about men coming down. It's about women coming up.
Wow.
It's time for the feminine, not just women, but for the feminine principle to rise up and see its power.
Mm.
Because for so many thousands of years, we've been taught, again, the programming, we've been taught that the yin side, the yin, quote unquote, feminine side is powerless.
Mm.
All those yin qualities of intuition, emotion, vulnerability, receptive qualities, all these different traditional so-called yin qualities in Taoism. If you look at that list, I find it fascinating because we've been told that those things are powerless and weak and inferior. And that is so far from the truth. They are incredibly powerful, though they're equally as powerful as their opposite yang masculine qualities. The truth is that the power in the yin is the hidden side,
Mm.
right? It's not visible in the 3D material world. So now what I see happening in the world is that we're starting to wake up to the power of emotion, the power of intuition, the power of vulnerability, the power of the receptive quality, the power of rest. We're learning about all these amazing things that have been the programming has kept it suppressed for thousands of years. So now what's happening is this balance between masculine and feminine, yin and yang. And so I share that story with you because I feel like the conversation today is sort of circling around this
Yeah.
issue. We're circling around what's really important for us right now. And I
Yeah.
think so much of it is balancing this one polarity between masculine and feminine. Because quite honestly, the feminine side has been victimized.
Yeah.
it fits into that polarity of victim oppressor that we talked about, um, because the yin side has been oppressed. And so here we are, and now we're starting to wake up to this greater picture and seeing the whole picture. And women have been finding more and more their power and rising up to meet the masculine. Again,
Yeah.
and it's not about and also it's not just in women.
Mm.
We all, men and women, have a masculine and feminine side. So my whole life has been about developing both sides, masculine
Yeah.
and feminine. I have a very strong feminine side, and I know that that's the principle that I personally have experienced is that we are only able to open our hearts to the degree to which we've balanced yin and yang, masculine and feminine within us. And I think that that's something that not a lot of people are talking about, but I feel it's very important, uh, because it gives us, if we want to live from the heart, if we want to live from that witness place where the heart remains open, that's a key practice, is balancing those two sides. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And we started off right at the start of the conversation where, you were talking about how it's all in the words, all in the language. And I think most of us understand the power of inversion, of how a lot of things on the public stage are taking some of these things and inverting them. And if we think about the whole transgender issue and gender neutral issues and goodness knows what else around that, you can almost see, to me anyway, Brad, it looks like you're taking this really powerful concept that can really help us all transform as humanity, of this balance between the masculine and feminine energies, but inverting it to make it about the sexual orientation or the physical body and things. And that's missing the whole core point of it in my
Yeah.
world. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wrote a whole chapter in my book about this. It's because it's an important topic. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people are very interested in it. It's risen to, a very uh, uh, I was going to say popular, but it's not necessarily popular, but
Yeah.
it's a topic that everybody's aware of. Let's say that. And so what I come back to is this higher level picture
Mm.
that we're not men and women. We're souls.
Yeah.
If you're working on spiritual awakening, if you're working on living from your heart, you've probably had many, many lifetimes as both a man and a woman.
Mm.
And so we are androgynous souls, and we're here to play this game of masculine and feminine, man, woman, and everything in between.
Mm.
A million shades of gray in between the masculine and the feminine. Or let's say if there are 8 billion people on the planet, then there are 8 billion shades of gray, because no two
Yeah.
people are the same. We all have different qualities of masculine and feminine within us.
And that will shift a lot as we go through our life experiences and grow and integrate and everything. Just like, which leads me nicely on, because I'm conscious of the time, I could literally speak to you all day. It's we can't leave without talking about our animal friends. And this is how we connected, because you, Leslie, myself, we're all very keen on interspecies communication. And I've recently just done your amazing course that you do for the love of animals with Anna Breckenridge. It's absolutely fantastic. We're going to be talking about Brad's resources at the end. But there's so much in species communication, and awareness and tuning in and listening to our intuition can teach us about where to go, where so many people feel trapped at the moment. Have you got any stories that you can share that could sort of help people realize why this is so important, that we don't feel this disconnect from other species, whether they're animals or plants and everything else on this planet?
Oh, so many stories. I wish we had
Yeah.
a whole episode for
I know we
that.
might need to do it. Comment below if we need a whole episode on this, because for me it's my favorite subject. Yeah.
Oh, me too. This is my passion. I love animals and the natural world. And yeah, I teach this course with my friend and colleague Anna Breitenbach, who's got to be one of the world's most extraordinary interspecies communicators. Um, so we had a lot of fun putting that course together. Um, to really the purpose of that course is, the principle is that first of all, everybody
Hmm.
can be an interspecies communicator. You don't have to have special skills or talents. I mean, it does help to study, but everybody can do it without exception, I would say, more or less. And and so the principle is that that Anna and I put forward in our course is that we can only be as clear a communicator as the ego is clear, because the ego is the lens through which we see the world, communicate with the world, and interact with the world. And so, if that egoic lens is clouded with all kinds of judgments and patterns and heavy fears and desires and whatever else, that's going to cloud our capacity to hear well and to speak well with any species, human, even communicating with humans, right? But especially with non-humans. So that's the principle. We go into that in depth and how to hold that witness state, which is the witness state is that place where one has to go to be able to have a clear communication with another species and communicate telepathically. It won't happen otherwise. Yeah, so let's see. I'm segueing a bit here. So to get back to your question, you asked about stories. Let me tell one or examples. Let me give you one. Again, it's something my spouse Leslie was told by her guides when we first started doing this work. We live in South Africa, out in the bush, and there are a lot of animals here, and we support a lot of animal and causes that support the natural world and the animals. And so we're always doing this work, and we're working with interspecies communication. And so Leslie's guides said to us that one day all the fences in the world would come down, and that humans would live in harmony again with the natural world like we used to long ago. And they said that probably won't happen in your lifetime. You probably won't live to see that. But your job is to start planting seeds so that that can happen one day. And so I take that, I took it into my heart when I heard it, and I knew the truth of it. And I share that with everybody because I think anybody who's a lover of animals, uh, this applies to all of us. Just look at how popular interspecies communication has become, right? And now you've got this whole series that's out called the telepathy tapes, which is so popular, and it's all about telepathy. So this is, I think, the birthing. We are the midwives of this new paradigm of the heart, which is about living from the heart. It's about living in harmony with the natural world. It's about being able to communicate with other species, even. So. So yeah, that's one. It's not an example of a communication with an
Yeah,
animal. I have many of those, but I think that's an important one.
I think it's such an important one. And I think, when people are, if they're listening to this and they're struggling a bit, where do I start? You've got so many resources that can help people. As I said, I've just gone through and will be continuing to go back through because there's loads of exercises that are so helpful in your online course for the love of animals that you do with Anna. But how else can people use so much of the wisdom that you and Leslie and Anna have accumulated over your long journey to help them? So, talk about some of your books and your courses, and obviously, Brad's links will all be below. But what particular resonates to bring to people's attention today, Brad?
Well, thank you for asking about that, Catherine. Let's see, a few things. First of all, I would say we have a lot of free resources. If you go to corelight.org, look for the tab. If you scroll down the homepage, you'll see the stuff there, but you can go to the menu as well and see resources, and it's free content. It's all kinds of free stuff. So videos, audios, written material, and so forth. So that's one way. If the work resonates with you, it's something you feel like you'd like to pursue, I highly recommend the courses that we offer. We're always adding new courses. We just added one in February. There'll be another one coming out later this year in probably September 2025. But anyway, For the Love of Animals is there. So that's our most popular course. Obviously, it's something that everybody, we all love animals. So, yeah, so I would recommend any of our courses. Just feel into which one draws you. So that's number one, and then number two is the books. Like you said,
Yeah,
we have several books. The primary book that we wrote is called The Marriage of Spirit,
yeah,
Enlightened Living in Today's World. And that's it's a book that's not meant to be a quick read. It's a book that you can take with you. It's a book that you can really keep referring back to. But it gives all the basic principles that we've been talking about today. So I highly recommend that book and any of our books you go to the website, corelight.org, and you'll see store. And so all of our books and audios are there.
yeah. And
We
I've got
also,
that. I'm listening to that on my Audible at the moment, so it's brilliant
oh,
because I
good.
love listening to content like that when I'm out on a dog walk or I'm doing my garden or cleaning out the animals. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you. The last thing I'll mention is there's a tab called Sacred Activism. And we have a bunch of things there, including prayer circles that you can go participate in to pray for the natural world, different animal species, non-human species, peace in the world. We have our humanitarian arm, seedsoflight.org, which supports marginalized communities and orphans and vulnerable children here in South Africa, and many other things.
Absolutely fantastic. I just I just absolutely love all this information. I am reaching out to anyone, regardless of what platform you're listening to. Leave a comment heart below. Let us know what resonates with you. Let us know what questions you've got, what you would like us to dive deeper to, because I will definitely be communicating with Brad and see if he will come back because I have got so many questions. And for me, Brad, this is the most important area that we can all be putting our attention. You know, we've got this saying that we've all heard of, energy flows where attention goes. And it's so easy to get our attention to be pulled in things that aren't serving us and aren't serving the greater good. And this work is, of course, everything's about balance. I'm not saying that you completely shut yourself off from what's happening in the world at all, but there's so many resources on Brad's website. All the links would be below. It would really help us get this message out because my experience, Brad, is that this information is difficult to get out to people, to the wider audiences. So when you make a comment, when you share, when you like, this really helps sort of break that algorithm and get it out there. Are there any final messages that you've got for people, Brad?
Let me see. I think I should say that, one of the most rewarding and perhaps the most challenging things we can do in this life is to look in the mirror, and when we choose to really get real with ourselves and look at ourselves, I would imagine most of the people listening to your show are already doing this work to some degree, so they'll know the truth of that. But to me, that's where it's at. That's what's going to change the world is the more people who wake up to the truth of who they are, wake up to their own hearts and their own love. That's what will change the world. And let's add to wake up to their feminine side, to wake up to the truth of the power of the feminine. No matter what gender body you're in, this is so much of the journey that we all need to be on.
I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for all the amazing resources that you've got out there for all of us. People, let us know in the comments if you're listening to this on one of the podcast platforms. Let us know, write a review, and let us know what you want to hear more of. Thank you so much, Brad. Thank you so much to everyone that's watching. Bye.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this powerful conversation with Brad and I on Deprogrammed, Why the System Fears the Power of the Heart. I truly believe that reconnecting with our heart space through self-inquiry, intuition, and interconnection with all beings is the most revolutionary act we can take in today's world. It's not about suppressing the masculine, it's about rising into balance with the divine feminine and remembering the natural wisdom we were never meant to forget, including our ability to communicate deeply with animals, nature, and each other. So if Brad's work resonated with you, You'll find links to all his transformational courses, teachings and offerings in the show notes below. I really can't recommend them highly enough. And if you're being called to go deeper into your own journey, whether that's through an animal communication session or a one-on-one consultation to restore physical, emotional and energetic balance for yourself or for your animals, you can find details on how to work with me below in my one-on-one sessions and lots of testimonials from previous happy clients as well. We really don't have to do this alone. When we support each other in rising into truth, love and sovereignty, we deprogram the old system and reclaim the world we want to live in. So much love, gratitude. Until next time, stay curious, grounded and heart-led. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And if you feel inspired, please do share with your friends and family. This helps us spread the word and also helps me encourage some exciting new guests to take part in this podcast. And above all, stay curious and stay free.